Hi everyone, thank you for joining my channel. Today I'm interpreting the natal chart of Sean Combs at the request of several of my viewers. And one thing I want to emphasize is that his Venus is at 22 degrees of Libra. So this is important for a couple of reasons. So Venus is in its rulership here, it's in its home sign. And Venus is basically at the top in terms of rulership hierarchy in his chart. And I'm going to go over that later into the video. Also, there's some controversy about this, but when you have a sign at 22 degrees, or when you have a planet at 22 degrees of a sign, I should say, it's become coined as the kill or be killed aspect. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, knowing more about what that means, stay tuned. I'm going to go into that in my video as well. So one of the first things I actually want to bring up about this chart that's significant is that he actually has no planets in fire here, which I was surprised at because we see him as such a driven, ambitious person. He does have Chiron in Aries, but Chiron is not a planet, it's an asteroid, so I'm not going to count that. But when you have zero planets in an element in your chart, it can be common to try and overcompensate by developing your own energy in that element. So, for fire, for instance, he may become attracted to lots of people who have strong placements in fire. If any of these planets do show up in the first, fifth, or ninth houses for him, which are fire houses, there may be a very strong emphasis on those planets, so on and so forth. He also has some very powerful aspects in this chart that I think overcompensate or make up for the lack of fire energy here. A theme that you'll notice that I talk about throughout this chart is that he's kind of a master at overcompensating. And he has some very powerful aspects when it comes to Mars and Pluto. So again, what he lacks in fire here, I do see him as being able to overcompensate. Now, adding on to that, we do see that his Mars is at 29 degrees of Capricorn. I will say that if he were born a little bit later, so basically anytime after 2 p.m. on this day, his Mars would flip into Aquarius. Now, I really am going to go out on a limb and say that I highly suspect that his Mars is at 29 degrees of Capricorn for a few reasons. One of those reasons being Mars makes so many really strong aspects here. Not to mention his sun is in Scorpio, which is co-ruled by Mars. So when you have Mars at 0 degrees of a sign, it basically means that you're coming into this world with really fresh eyes. Some people say that you're starting a new life cycle in that particular sign. So it's like someone's kind of stumbling through life, if you will, a little bit. They're making a lot of mistakes. They tend to do the same things over and over again, expecting different results. And I mean, it's certainly not the worst thing someone could have in their natal chart by any means, but it does mean that they're going to kind of struggle a little bit in that area. But he is so successful. He has built an empire. I mean, there's so many ways that we've seen he's achieved success. So for that reason alone, I don't think it makes sense to me anyway that this Mars would be at 0 degrees of Aquarius. Let me know what you guys think. I want to hear from you on that too. Um, so another thing about Mars at 29 of Capricorn, so because it's at 29 degrees, it's known as an anaretic degree. So it's the final degree in this sign before it flips into a new sign. So some people think this means that you've done Capricorn before, you're doing it over again. You know, he may be really doing something over and over to get it right and finish it out in this lifetime. This would suggest that Sean Combs has a lot of experience when it comes to Capricorn related matters in past lives. So, what do we think of when we think of Capricorn energy? Building, carrying out long-term goals and projects, and really kind of building something brick by brick until you've completed a project. Capricorns also tend to have difficulty with ending things, so they build and build and build, and then they don't let go, even if they perhaps should. So he kind of has the best of both worlds here. And I believe Mars is exalted in Capricorn. So I say that he has the best of both worlds in my mind because Aries co-rules Mars. So we tend to think of a fire being lit under someone. It spurs them into action. They get passionate. They get excited to start something new. But the Capricorn energy helps him to be able to stick with something and build something slowly over time, whereas just Aries alone tends to move on to the next thing before they've finished what they're working on. So this is a really good placement for him. Mars in Capricorn means, in general, that this is going to be someone who's very driven. He's really going to excel at building long-term projects and goals. He's a very strategic thinker and very calculating. So I know some of you have probably already noticed this moon in Virgo. So this is going to add to this flavor of him being quite methodical, deliberate, and careful. And this is someone who has tenacity and he'll really stick with something until he has the problem solved. Like I said before, this Mars is making a bunch of really powerful aspects, and one of them being it is involved in this T square um, with Mercury and Saturn. So Mercury opposing Saturn is his tightest aspect because this is at 4 degrees of Scorpio, and then we have Saturn at 4 degrees of Taurus. And then both these planets are making a square to Mars. So basically, all of the Mercury opposing Saturn energy is going to get channeled through this Mars. I have to say, I was a bit baffled when I saw Mercury opposing Saturn personally, because I tend to think of Sean Combs as a rapper and a performer. Um, I mean, of course, with all the news that's come out lately, he's known for much more than that. But growing up in the 90s, in the early 2000s, I sort of saw him primarily as like a rapper slash singer, maybe. So I was surprised when I saw Mercury opposing Saturn because that denotes somebody who has real issues with communication. They tend not to really be able to speak and articulate themselves clearly, or they could have issues with that and struggle with that. Um, so this could also indicate he really had some problems in school growing up. He wasn't that smart, or he was delayed in terms of reading and writing. So those are all the downsides. I did watch some of the documentary on him that's out, and I did see that he actually is not as talented in rapping and singing, so then it kind of made more sense to me. Another thing about Mercury opposing Saturn is that this is someone who could be quite self-critical, especially with Moon in Virgo as well. Um, and so, again, this kind of goes with what I said. He may have had some learning issues growing up. But while I don't see him as very book smart, I do see him as a very street smart person. So what he lacks in book smart arena, I do see him as making up for it in terms of really noticing things that other people don't figure out or notice. He may get a chip on his shoulder every once in a while, but like I said, this is making this T square to Mars, and I actually see him as using this T square to his benefit, because it's causing him to work things out. Again, this is someone who wants to build something, and he has the tenacity and the determination to stick with it and figure it out. His Mars is so strong in this chart that it's like, I'm just going to keep pushing until I get it. His Saturn is in Taurus, which tells me that he may have struggled with feeling like he never had enough. He never had enough stuff. There may never have been enough money growing up. And he may still feel that way. The moon here is at 8 degrees of Virgo. So if it's around 8 degrees with his birth time, this would be making a trine to Saturn. And that tells me he feels or he did feel a lack of something in the way of having enough as a kid. So it could have been enough stuff, could have been enough money, also father figure. I'm going to talk about this later, but Venus in this chart is only 1 degree away from Jupiter. So this is someone who wants a lot. This is like kind of a hedonist. He wants to be surrounded by pleasure and luxury all the time, basically. So he's really feeling this lack, probably in his childhood, of, lack of these things. And again, with this T square to Mars and Mars making some powerful aspects, I do see him as having said to himself, we need to overcompensate and shift in the other direction. Um, Another thing about Saturn, um, or the moon making a trine to Saturn, because the moon represents the mother, it does make me wonder if his mother was quite cold or emotionally withdrawn towards him when he was a child. It seems like as an adult, they've cultivated a friendship and become close, but Virgo moon may represent the fact that his mother is just as calculating as he is. So, for instance, I'm wondering if she saw her son start to make money. She saw him starting to become famous. She sees an opportunity. She wants to get close to him. She wants a piece of the pie. And so she kind of strategizes and figures out a way to get close to him, get into his inner circle, so on and so forth. I don't know that much about his mother, so I know there was a little mention in the documentary, but this is just my prediction based off of what I'm seeing here. Another thing about Mars is that it's making a trine to Pluto. And like I said, his sun is in Scorpio, so it's actually co-ruled by both these planets. So the fact that they're making a trine in this chart is pretty strong for him. So again, I think that Mars trine Pluto really makes up for the fact that he has no planets in fire because this is going to make him unstoppable. He's going to have a real drive. Again, this is going to go very well with Mars and Virgo because it's going to give him like almost a laser-like focus in terms of achieving his goals. The downside to this aspect is that he can become obsessive with Pluto-like stuff, gaining power, one-upping people, fighting to gain control, and he can also become destructive. So now I'm going to talk about his Venus at 22 Libra. So first of all, Venus is in its home sign. It's ruled by Libra. And I think I said at the beginning of the video, it plays a role in, I think, functioning at the helm of the ship in this chart. So it leads up a lot of hierarchy. I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Let's just start with his sun. So his sun is in Scorpio, right? This is co-ruled by Mars in Capricorn. Mars in Capricorn is ruled by Saturn in Taurus. And then Saturn in Taurus is ruled by this Venus in Libra. And Venus is ruled by Libra, like I said, so it has no place else to go. So if you think of rulership as a food chain of sorts, we see the sun in Scorpio in this case as kind of like a bottom feeder. It's at the bottom of the food chain. The next chain in the link is going to be Mars in Capricorn. The next chain in the link is going to be, or the next link in the chain is going to be Saturn in Taurus. And then it ends with this Venus in Libra. So that's what I mean when I say I feel like Venus at 22 Libra is making a lot of final decisions. It kind of, in other words, it kind of has a final say, so to speak, in this chart. Also, Mercury and Pluto are the other kind of final say planets in this chart, and I'll get into that as well. So Venus plays a really important role in this chart. And let me do this over. And so I was thinking about it being 22 degrees. So someone made a comment on my last video of Nick Reiner's natal chart when I was looking at his progressions. And I was looking at the transits and his progressions at the time his parents were murdered. Ironically, the moon happened to be at 22 Libra at that time, and it was conjunct his progressed ascendant. And someone pointed out that 22 degrees is a kill or be killed aspect. Now, I want to preface to everybody watching this. There's probably many of you who have planets in 22 degrees in your natal chart. I myself have my Neptune at 22 degrees Sag. So when I say kill or be killed, it doesn't just mean violence, although it can. It can mean violence, it can mean death and destruction in that sense, literally. But it can also mean the metaphorical ending or death of events or symbols or things like that in your life. It could mean turbulent or chaotic change. So just keep that in mind. I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying, if you have a planet at 22 degrees, you're doomed. It means you're going to kill someone or someone's going to kill you. That's obviously ridiculous. So I just want to preface that. So the 22 kill or be killed aspect, it's a newer concept in astrology. This isn't something that's going to get taught in traditional astrology. So this was coined by and developed by an astrologer named Nikola Stojanovic. I still don't know much about his work. I was introduced to it by a classmate in a forensic astrology course that I took. I had heard murmurs of it here and there before that, but I didn't really know what to make of it. I had never heard of it. I was never taught it. So this was how I found out about it. And again, it's quite interesting that Venus is at this degree because it does play such a pivotal role in his chart, like I talked about. I also did a bit of research on Venus at 22 degrees in particular. And it suggests that Sean Combs is going to experience intensity in the areas of love and relationships. This can lead to destruction, so it may lead to crisis in his relationships, misuse of power in his relationships, or lots of turbulence in the areas of finance, which is interesting because he's definitely going through that right now, being in prison. So, this kill or be killed aspect definitely makes me think of him harming others, doing destruction in his relationships, all the sex trafficking that he did. But he is also being killed in a sense by being cut off from access to all the things that matter to him. And he has Venus 1 degree of Jupiter. So this is someone, I think I said this before, this is someone who really wants to be surrounded by all things pleasurable all the time. So his obsession with being surrounded by women, beauty, love, romance, sex, it's now dead to him. He's totally cut off from it. So let me know what you guys think about the 22 kill or be killed. What are your thoughts about it? Like I said, Venus conjunct Jupiter represents, Jupiter just expands things, it makes things bigger. So it just means he wants a lot of Venus types things. And the fact that Venus is making a square to Mars is quite significant as well. So this means that he is accustomed to fighting for what he wants. Things could get physical. He could really go to extremes in terms of fighting for what he wants. Um, His relationships are quite intense and passionate. So even without the 22 degrees of Venus, I mean, there's really enough in this chart that tells me or tells us that his relationships are just really intense, really passionate, but also filled with drama, conflict, and jealousy. And I think Venus square Mars is definitely responsible for all the ways that he abused his power with people, with women for sure. So if you've noticed, I have not brought up his Sun or his Mercury in Scorpio yet. And I feel like people tend to think about Scorpio with him the most because Scorpio is related to what lies beneath the surface. It can be very vengeful, so on and so forth. So he does have his Sun and Mercury in Scorpio. This goes so well again with his moon in Virgo, which I know I've brought up a lot. Um, the Scorpio, I think, gives him the ability to be street smart, to be hyper vigilant. I think it allows him to tap into who he can take advantage of and who he can manipulate. Scorpio is also like a natural born detective. So I think this just lends to him having more of an ability to really stick with problems and solve them. Another interesting thing is that his Mercury and Pluto are in mutual reception. And like I said before, the final depositors in his chart are Venus and then this, Mercury, Pluto, um, mutual reception. So what I mean by mutual reception is it's easier for me to give an example than try to explain it. So Mercury is in the sign of Scorpio. And then Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, or it's co-ruled, I should say, by Pluto. Pluto in his chart is in the sign of Virgo, and that is ruled by Mercury. So it's like these planets are making a crisscross to each other. They're playing ping pong with each other. They're going back and forth between each other and no one else in this way. So in my mind, it's like a conjunction. And so, what this would mean is that he is obsessively thinking about Pluto things. He is obsessively thinking about power dynamics, control. Um, I'm also thinking about at his sex parties that he wanted to control them. He wanted to control the people involved in the acts. He didn't really want to be involved in it. And I'm thinking about in the documentary that there was a guy that talked about being involved in this and that Sean Combs had hired him um, to be with him and his ex-girlfriend. And I want to talk about again Moon and Virgo here because the guy was saying that he was like asking him like to do very, very precise, detailed things like move your head 3 inches to the left, for example. So he's like asking him to do these things that most of us wouldn't really pay attention to. It's so controlling and so precise. And again, the Scorpio energy in particular, I see him as being like a behind the scenes kind of a person, but with all the aspects in his chart and then this Mercury in mutual reception to Pluto, I see him as being behind the scenes, but basically wanting to control the hell out of everybody around him. So Neptune here, I don't see this as doing a lot. I do see this making a sextile to Mars. So again, this is really good for him. He's able to pretty easily carry out whatever vision he has in his mind. But if you've seen my other videos, I talk about how important Neptune is for people who commit crimes because it allows them to see things through this distorted lens, and it allows them to tell themselves a story about why what they're doing is okay or justified. And he really doesn't have any hard aspects with Neptune. So it kind of makes me question how he is able to tell himself what he's doing is okay, how he's able to minimize it. I mean, how he's able to sleep at night, basically. And for me, I go back to this Venus in Libra because it is kind of at the top of that food chain in his chart, like I talked about. And Libra in particular is very much about um, equality and balance and tit for tat. So I could see him saying to himself, for example, well, I'm doing so much for this person. I gave this person a career in music. I'm financing this person's lifestyle. I am doing all these really big things for this person. Therefore, they have to return the favor and do these really big things for me. So I'm sort of wondering, based on his chart and his aspects, I'm wondering if that is one of the ways he could have really rationalized his behaviors to himself. Let me know what you guys think. What do you see here that really allows him to, I mean, obviously he's obsessed with power, that's no question, but what what jumps out at you guys as being able for him to say to himself, what I'm doing is fine? What allows him to minimize his behavior, basically? Let me know. The last thing I want to bring up is that he has Pluto conjunct South Node. And this would be, in effect, making an opposition to North Node, which interestingly is in Pisces, which I'll talk about. So Pluto conjunct South Node, we've seen this in a couple of other charts I've done. What this means essentially is that someone really wants to transform their way of doing things in this lifetime. They really want to change things up. They want to do things differently. The fact that his South Node is in Virgo in particular would tell me that he may want to do something different in terms of transforming the way that he's really hard on himself and very critical of himself. Um, Now, the fact that this is opposing the North Node means that something really big or extreme may have to happen in order for him to achieve this North Node and to, in this case, achieve a life path in Pisces. I do think that he could have, by getting into music and into the arts, that could certainly be a way for him to achieve this life path. But with this Mercury um, opposing Saturn, I think that that really posed a challenge for him. So instead, he got much more into the business aspect of it, which of course was, Mars and Capricorn, Pluto and Virgo, so on and so forth. So I think it's really interesting that he's landed in prison because Pisces and Neptune represents places of institution, including prisons. And so I almost see what's happening now to him is as being this Pluto opposing North Node that's playing out because he's been forced essentially into this Pisces institution, this Pisces environment. It'll also be really interesting to see what happens when he's released from custody because I think from what I've heard, he's only doing like a year or more, like maybe a year or two in prison. So I don't know, maybe he will have come out learning to meditate or really integrating meditation, spirituality into his life. If he doesn't do that, I'm wondering about, the odds of him going back to prison because there are people who apparently are now planning to sue him and bring up lawsuits against him. So that would be another way for him to be kind of forced, if you will, into achieving this life path. Again, I'm kind of starting to see a pattern with these charts where people can't really achieve their North Node, they're being blocked from it. And so something has to really force them and push them into these environments where they're kind of forced to live out this life purpose. For him in particular, it's no coincidence that it's Pisces, the place of prison, basically. So I know that was a lot. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you think in terms of the 22 degrees. And my question about what you see and hear that helps you feel like he was really able to convince himself that what he was doing was not bad. I really want us to learn from each other, so let me know what you guys think. I really love hearing from you. And if you're interested in astrology, you're interested in true crime, you're interested in learning some of the aspects that lend towards someone committing a crime, definitely subscribe to my channel. Stay tuned for future videos, and thank you for watching.